And we begin with that state of emergency in California as fires spread in both the northern and southern part of the state. The death toll is now growing. The Camp Fire alone in Northern California has already claimed 42 lives. Will Carr is in Paradise, California, with the latest on that. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Diane. There's still more than 200 people missing here in the Camp Fire, and it really looks like a bomb has exploded here in the town of Paradise. You cannot overstate how widespread this devastation is, and that makes it a painstaking process looking for the people who are missing. Search crews are having to comb through every single property, every single inch of these properties as they're looking for more bodies, and they do believe the death toll will continue to go up. As you're walking along, you can see buildings that still have walls standing have been reduced to rubble. There's nothing but carnage and devastation spread out all across this area. But at the same time, we are hearing more harrowing stories of survival. We spoke to one man who's actually still up here living in Paradise. Amazingly, his home did not burn to the ground, and he did not evacuate when so many others decided to get out of this area when the flames were surrounding this community. He said he didn't leave because he lives with his 90-year-old mother who is blind. So what he did is he picked up a hose, he started spraying down his house. He said he watched a wall of flames racing down towards his home. He thought his entire family was going to die, and then in a split second, those flames turned and headed in a different direction. He says that he thanks God and he believes that angels were looking out for him, and the fact that his home is still standing, but his neighborhood has been reduced to ash. He broke down crying and says he has survivor's guilt, and that when his neighbors are able to actually make it back up here, they can all stay with him. He's going to give them food, water, supplies, anything they need. When I asked him when he looks out and sees what's left of Paradise here, he said absolutely nothing. Diane.
Well, an incredible story. Thank you. And of course, Southern California is also getting hit hard. And now authorities are warning of explosive fire growth. Gio Benitez is in Agoura Hills, California. Gio?
Hey there, Diane. Here in Southern California, as you have seen, and you can imagine, there's just so much destruction, like right here. This is one of at least 370 homes that have been destroyed here in Southern California so far. It's barely recognizable, maybe with the exception of that chimney over there. And now, Diane, the real concern is whether any new fires could spark up. And you know, yesterday, when we were here in Southern California already, we were out reporting, we ended up finding out that a new fire had started. It was called the Peak Fire, and it was right off the highway, and overlooking that highway was a town. So we're talking about a town that was immediately in danger. There were all these homes there, and then there was the danger of that fire joining the other fire that had already started. And we were on the highway as firefighters were battling this blaze. We were witnessing it all. Take a look at what we saw. We're on Highway 118 here in the Simi Valley, and just look at all of the smoke here. Authorities are trying to put this fire out right now. You can see that helicopter. There is a neighborhood right underneath here. So thankfully, firefighters were able to put that fire out. They were able to control it. So far, we haven't seen any new fires spark up today. That is good news for now, because as long as no new fires spark up, they could at least control this one and start that very long road to recovery. And you know, so many people haven't even been able to get back to their homes just yet. We're talking about 5 days after this fire first started, and they haven't been able to go back to their homes, even if their homes haven't been damaged. And that's because that new fire concern is still very much alive here in Southern California. So we will have to watch for that. Diane?
All right, that's Gio Benitez from Malibu, California. And it's a similar picture in Calabasas, where the fires seem to have affected many, many homes, damaging some and then leaving others untouched. Natalie Brunell is there on the ground. Natalie, what are you seeing?
Yeah, that's right, Diane. It goes to show you just the erratic nature of this fire. We are standing around 4 homes that were just obliterated, and I'm a little bit tethered to the live signal, but I want to give you a lay of the land here. Just behind me, there is a garage where a car has totally been singed. You can't even see the steering wheel there anymore. And as I walk up this hill, you can see 2 more homes over here. As I walked up to those ashes, you can see a children's book that had practice cursive writing in there, you know, and the remains of a bicycle vehicles. So you know that these were family homes totally wiped out by this fire. And if we walk back down here, I want to show you that there's another house next door, that fourth one. And then just further down the street, homes that look completely untouched. Then we cross the street, and again, homes that are devastated by this fire, because those Santa Ana winds that we've been experiencing just sent embers flying. And so some homes lit up in smoke and others were totally spared, which just goes to show you how this fire sort of leapfrogged around these neighborhoods. And this one is still under mandatory evacuation, Diane.
Yeah, scary stuff, almost even more so to know how unpredictable the fires and the zones they're targeting seem to be. What are authorities advising people in the area to do?
Well, there's still a lot of danger, Diane, because there's still down power lines in the streets. So this community and many others still under mandatory evacuation. Some of the homes, including an apartment complex in Malibu yesterday, collapsed because of just the devastation. So these areas, these burned, charred homes are still very dangerous to step foot on. So officials are saying if you are still under evacuation orders, even though you might want to check on your belongings, check on your home, the safest thing is to stay away right now. And again, as Gio was mentioning, we are in extremely critical fire danger today as these Santa Ana winds push south to the San Diego County area.
All right, Natalie Brunell from Calabasas. Thanks, Natalie. And as Natalie mentioned, those Santa Ana winds are making things even harder for firefighters trying to battle these fires. Rob Marciano's in the fire zone with the latest on how the weather is affecting things. Rob?
Hello, Diane. Another long day expected here in Southern California with some of the strongest winds of this entire event. We already had a new fire start late in the day yesterday. This is near the 118 freeway where helicopters were making drops from the air, slowing down traffic. They managed to get a handle on that fire quickly, and that will be the strategy today as winds could gust in some spots to 90 miles an hour or higher. We've already had winds gusts to 86 miles per hour. The setup remains the same with high pressure over the mountains and compressing and accelerating that air through the canyons and up and over the mountains and dropping the levels of humidity to single-digit numbers. So for San Diego especially, not only do we have a high wind warning, but we have extremely critical fire danger for those low levels of humidity and that wind that is just going to continue to crank today. Slightly less wind tomorrow, but red flag warnings have been extended through tomorrow. Now, part of the reason why the winds have accelerated the past 2 days here is because cold air has dropped into the central U.S. Look at this video out of Wichita, Kansas. All sorts of spin-outs or de-icing the plains there. A couple of inches of snow there. They had their snowiest start to their snow season so far. And Bentonville, Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas, northwest of Little Rock, they saw a little bit of snowfall yesterday also, and this is all associated with this system that's pushing through the East Coast right now. You see a little bit of white there. Ithaca, New York, also seeing some snow across parts of the Ohio Valley, and a cold, miserable day, at least to start, across the I-95 corridor. Another storm coming in for Thursday. This one looks to be a little more substantial. It'll be a little colder, probably starting as a wintry mix of precip, Philadelphia north towards New York, Thursday afternoon into Thursday night, and some wind with this as well. So a substantial storm coming in then. And here's the footprint of what we expect to see potentially for accumulating snow with that. So this is the time of year that we see that. As far as the wind event here, we haven't seen an event like this for this strong and this long since 2007, were disastrous results there, especially for San Diego. So anxious times ahead. And by the way, Diane, if you don't know anything about the jazz guitarist, the man who owns this home, unfortunately, Lee Ritenour, one of the greats, this was a beautiful home and unfortunately one of many here in Malibu that was taken by this fire. Diane?
Wow, Lee Ritenour played with the Mamas and the Papas, also mentored young musicians, one of so many people who lost their homes in this fire. Rob, thank you. Meanwhile, President Trump approved a disaster declaration in the state, but his focus, based on his Twitter feed at least, seems to be more on his recent trip to Paris. Suffice it to say, it doesn't sound like the president had a very good time. Karen Travers is outside the White House. Karen, I don't think he's giving this one a good review on TripAdvisor.
Yeah, didn't seem to have a good experience in Paris over the weekend, Diane. Say au revoir to that bromance with the French president, Emmanuel Macron. The president spent a considerable amount of time this morning on Twitter talking about France, talking about Macron, talking about his poll numbers, pushing back on Macron's criticism about the president's statements about nationalism. And the president, as you see there on the screen, talking about the U.S. defense of France in the world wars. The president also, curiously, went after France for wine. He was saying that France makes excellent wine, but so does the United States, and they make it very hard for the U.S. to sell its wines in France. Diane, like many of the president's more inflammatory tweets, we often don't know what prompted it. What was he reading? What was he watching or listening to this morning to spark this big outburst against France? Many people on social media were also noting that it is the 3rd anniversary of that horrific terror attack in Paris, and this morning the president going after one of the United States' oldest and strongest allies.
Karen, it's also starting to sound like we might have yet another cabinet member leaving the White House. The Washington Post is reporting that the president is getting ready to remove Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. What are we hearing about that?
Yeah, this seems like it's happening soon, but no timeline for exactly when the president will do it. Multiple sources are telling us that the president is looking to remove Kirstjen Nielsen as the Homeland Security Secretary or have her resign. And Diane, he's also looking to make this a double shift, have Chief of Staff John Kelly also leave his position. Kelly has been a very forceful defender of Nielsen in the White House, and Nielsen has really been a target of the president's anger and frustration about immigration policies. He's blamed her for the fact that there was, in his view, an increase in border crossings and that the U.S. has had such a difficult time on the southern border. Chief of Staff John Kelly, when he was the Homeland Security Secretary, Nielsen worked for him, so he was very instrumental in getting her into that position, very strong defender of her. In fact, he had a confrontation recently with the National Security Advisor about Kirstjen Nielsen's job performance. So we've talked about this before. There are always these shifts after a midterm. The president, of course, firing Jeff Sessions last week. Now it's looking like he's going to make some more changes to his cabinet and his inner circle here at the White House.
All right, Karen Travers from outside the White House. We appreciate it, Karen. Thanks. And now let's head overseas to the Gaza Strip. Violence is flaring up in that area. Yet again, hundreds of rockets have already been fired. But now we are hearing word of a possible ceasefire. Molly Hunter is in Tel Aviv with the latest. Molly, I know this information is all really new, but what are you hearing so far?
Hey, Diane, good evening from here. That's right. It's new and possible being the key word. So just in the last hour, it's been fairly quiet on that Gaza border. We're about 40 miles up the coast from Gaza and those southern Israel border towns. But the Palestinian militant factions have said they have reached a mediated ceasefire with Egypt. That's key. There have been a lot of different mediators, including Egypt, the UN, Norway. So this isn't Hamas and Israel talking. So they've said they will ceasefire. They've reached a mediated ceasefire with Egypt. On the Israeli side, though, after a 7-hour marathon Security Cabinet meeting, the Israelis have said that they did not mention the word ceasefire, but they have said they reserve the right to act. So, Diane, possible being the key word, because if either side kind of slips up in the next couple hours, this quiet could be over really soon.
I'm sure a lot of people crossing their fingers there. You know, Molly, this is the most significant escalation since 2014. I know it's sad to say they're kind of used to violence there, but how worried are people about this?
Diane, that's right. People are used to violence, and kind of stuff like this, skirmishes for kind of 2-3 days, have happened a lot since 2014. None as serious as what we've seen in the last couple of days. It all started on Sunday when an Israeli intelligence raid, special ops, went into Gaza. It was apparently an intelligence gathering operation, went terribly wrong. They were exposed, fighting started, and airstrikes covered their retreat. Now, 7 Palestinian militants were killed in that, an Israeli commando was killed in that, and that kicked the whole thing off. So then after kind of a quiet day Monday during funerals, more than 300 rockets flew from Gaza into Israel. Airstrikes all over Gaza kind of continued today. And the death toll is mounting. So on the Palestinian side, 14 at least, mostly fighters, several dozen injured. And on the Israeli side, also several dozen injured, and including one man died who was living in Ashkelon. But Diane, how worried are officials? I mean, I think officials kind of are always worried that this could get to the brink at any point. It comes at a really interesting time, though. I just want to give a little context. It comes at a point where Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Paris, of course. We know that he left Paris early to come back here because of this. And he was actually speaking about peace and about avoiding unnecessary war with Gaza. So there was just a huge kind of cash deal that was being waited for in Gaza, much needed cash from the Qataris that was going to pay civil servant salaries, that was going to bring fuel. And Prime Minister Netanyahu defended this. He said, this is what we need to do. We need to alleviate the humanitarian crisis. We need to make life better for them, to ensure peace across the border for both sides. But really, Diane, I mean, we're just going to wait and see kind of this evening to see if it stays quiet. Of course, anything could break this tenuous calm.
All right, definitely hoping that it stays calm. It's kind of amazing to see how the domino effect of one event can result in so many lives lost. Molly Hunter there from Tel Aviv. Thanks, Molly. And now let's head back here at home, where opening arguments start today in the trial of accused drug lord El Chapo. Liz Herr is in Brooklyn, where that trial is taking place. And Liz, I mean, El Chapo has now become infamous and famous at the same time for these major escapes that he has managed in so many different prisons. What are officials doing to prevent that from happening here?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Officials here in Brooklyn, they're calling the level of security that they've implemented here historic. The daily law enforcement presence, they say they've never added that much police presence here. And this is not only because of the defendant they're dealing with, as you mentioned, El Chapo, who has somehow managed to escape from maximum security prison in Mexico, not once, but twice. In addition to that kind of defendant, the protection here had to be extended to the jury. There were so many potential jurors who had to be dismissed because they were too scared to participate in this case. And so the jury who were picked, they will be escorted to and from the courthouse every day throughout the trial by U.S. Marshals. On top of that, we're talking about the witnesses who prosecutors have lined up to testify against El Chapo. Some of them are El Chapo's former associates, and they too have been given federal protection, this out of fear of retribution. So, Diane, as you can imagine, officials are not taking any chances, not only to keep Guzman where he belongs, in their view, but also to protect those who are going to be helping them throughout this process.
Understandably so, Liz. And good to hear, at least, that they are taking every precaution they can. What charges is he facing, and what kind of a sentence could he be looking at here?
Prosecutors have filed a 17-count indictment in this case, and those charges include murder, drug trafficking, conspiracy, and money laundering. Essentially, prosecutors are here arguing that El Chapo was involved in dozens of murders himself. He has also alleged to have smuggled hundreds of tons of drugs into the U.S., and prosecutors are arguing he made billions of dollars in drug deals, not only here in the U.S., but around the world. And so if convicted, prosecutors say he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Diane?
Elizabeth Herr from Brooklyn, New York. Thanks, Elizabeth. And finally, after a year-long competition nationwide, Amazon has finally announced where its new headquarters will be. Rebecca Jarvis is here with the details on that. And Rebecca, they surprised us, not one location, but two.
Yeah, this was like the Olympics bidding process.
They split the baby.
They split the baby. This was a beauty pageant that ended with two winners. It was like the Olympics bidding process, but on steroids. So New York City and Arlington, Virginia are the winners of this process. If you look at it that way, they'll be getting, between the two of them, 50,000 new jobs and a $5 billion investment over the next 10 years from Amazon. But as you said, this was an interesting outcome because a lot of people were thinking that a 238 city and state process, so 238 jurisdictions were bidding on all of this. They're surprised to see that it ended up being two, and that it ended up being two basically here in the Northeast, not spread out anywhere else in the country.
And, you know, this got so much publicity. And what made this such a big deal?
Well, first of all, the jobs in and of themselves are a big deal. 50,000 jobs, that's a huge deal for whatever local economy gets it. But it also became a big deal because of the amount of information that all of these places shared. So there's an argument to be made here that those 238 places shared information about universities, about what's going to happen in those communities, about spending that will take place, planned projects. Amazon now has all of that data, and we know they're a company that loves data and uses data. Now they have it, and they can use it to their benefit beyond just this process.
All right, well, now we know what Amazon's strategy was in all of this, presumably. But even on the receiving end, like not everybody is super excited about having Amazon come to their own backyard. Explain the pushback.
So you have some very high-profile individuals that are touting this. For example, Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio here in New York, both in the Amazon press release with very celebratory quotes. But not everyone feels that way. And the big issue are the tax incentives that are going to be given away to Amazon in order to lure them here. So this whole process, everybody who was bidding on this project had to pony up. And New York and Arlington, Virginia are putting billions of dollars in tax incentives on the table in order to lure in Amazon. Now, of course, we mentioned the jobs. They'll create jobs with those incentives. But there are local representatives who think, well, $2 billion in tax incentives, I would like to see those incentives go somewhere else. So there's going to be that debate around how these companies like Amazon, because this happens all the time, Diane. I mean, this happened on a grand scale here with Amazon, but it happens all the time that states and cities and jurisdictions fight among themselves and give away tax dollars in order to encourage companies to come and work with them.
Well, and it's the ongoing debate because small businesses don't get to take advantage of those same kinds of tax incentives because they don't have the clout. At the same time, you're bringing that number of jobs to an area. Most people see that part as a good thing. So it does seem to be a little bit hit or miss here. But either way, Amazon coming to the New York area and to Virginia. And possibly a few more locations going forward.
Absolutely. So they'll have a smaller location in Nashville where they're going to do some really specific types of work in Nashville, which they also announced today. That's 5,000 jobs. But going forward, Amazon has 3 headquarters, one in Seattle. That's the original spot, one in New York, and one in Arlington, Virginia.
All right. Well, if you had any doubt that Amazon was taking over the world before today, you probably don't anymore. Rebecca Jarvis, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. That does it for us here on The Debrief. Remember, you can catch your headlines all day long at abcnews.com or at your ABC News app. For ABC News Live, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.